Hello guys, in this video we will take a look at another type of container that's similar to an array but much more dynamic and much more powerful. So if you take a look at this particular implementation here, when we use the array, a few things were a bit fixed. So you had to tell before itself what is the size of the array. You could not have had an option to make this a bit dynamic, uh, based on what the situation demands. So it was kind of fixed that the size of the array is 5, the elements were also fixed. So now what we're going to do is look at another type or another variant of a container or something similar to an array, but it will be much more dynamic. That is, you can start with uh, an empty container, and then depending on the situation, as the situation demands, you can add the elements to it, you can increase its size dynamically. So it is called as a vector. So we are going to use that in this particular video. So let us get rid of the array and instead use something called as a vector. Okay, so the way vector works is you just have to tell what the data type is. So let's say if you're going to use a vector of integers, that's all that it takes to initialize this particular thing. And next, what we're going to do is, let me get rid of this as well. We are going to have a variable which will tell what the count is, and we'll ask the user for what is the size of that particular vector. Okay. So once the user tells us what the size of that particular vector is, we are going to use our for loop. Let's say we were going to loop until this particular instance. And what we will do is we will loop those many number of times, and we will have another variable here, and we'll ask the user to enter the what the values of that particular container should be, or what the values inside those vectors should be. And once the user will enter those values, what we are going to do is put that particular value into the vector. So the way to do that is you just have to take the vector and use something called as emplace back, and just add this particular value to it. That's all. So what we're doing in this particular code over here is first initializing a vector, some container that is going to store the integers. Then we will ask the user, okay, so what can be the size of this particular vector? So the user will input a particular size, which will be stored in count. And then what we're going to do is we're going to loop those many number of times, and then we are going to ask the user to enter the values which have to be put inside the vector. Once the user provides those values, we are going to put that particular value into the vector. So that's what we are going to do here. And after all this is done, let's do is let's print what is the size of the array, just to see if it really has taken our inputs. Okay, so let me do something like vector dot size. This is how you can access the size of the vector. And then we will, okay, let me first uh, execute this much so that we understand what's going on, and then we can go a bit further. So now the prompt is waiting for me to tell, okay, how many elements do you want in your vector? So let me tell 4. And now I need to enter those 4 values. So some random numbers, 50, 45, 23, maybe 34, and then maybe 89. Okay. So I have entered 4 values. And now if you see the vector, those elements have been entered into into that particular vector, and the size of the vector has now become 4. So we initially started with an empty vector, and over a period of time, dynamically we added the elements into the vector, and now the vector size has become 4. But we don't know what is there inside that vector. Okay, the vector is telling 4, but we don't know what is there inside that vector. So now we need to print the value of that particular vector, or what is stored inside that particular vector. So you already know the traditional way of for loop, so I'm not going to demonstrate that here, but there is another way. So especially when you have containers like this, containers like vector, there is another way in which you can iterate inside that container using the for loop, and that is something like this. So what you can do is for, and just tell some integer value, okay, which is there inside this particular vector. So what this basically means is iterate over this particular vector and in each iteration, give me one value. So currently the vector has 45, 23, 34, 89. So what is going to happen here is in the first iteration from this vector, I will get only 45. So that 45 will sit here inside this value. And what I can do is just print those values. Okay, just print that particular value. That's all. And in the next iteration, what is going to happen is the next element, 23, is going to sit inside this value, and that will be printed. So this is another way in which you can iterate over the elements of a particular vector. And this is also very effective. Of course, there are some better ways of storing these values and all those things. So we will learn over a period of time. So for now, this is good enough for you to know the way to iterate inside this particular vector and fetch the values. So let's execute this, but before doing that, let me add just another print statement so that we isolate it. So something like elements of the vector R, and then let's print so that we don't get confused in what we're seeing in the output. Let me clear the screen and let's execute. Okay, there is a warning. Yeah, you can ignore this particular warning for now. Um, so what you have here is like we can have, let's say, some 5 elements now, and then 23, and then 67, maybe 12, and then 45, maybe 33. Okay, so 5 elements have been entered. So you can see the size of the vector is 5 elements of the vector R, and whatever we had input, we are able to successfully retrieve that from that particular vector. So 23, 67, 12, 45, 33. So that's all it takes. So this is the way you can use the vector, iterate over it, add elements to it. There are more functionalities that this particular vector again offers. So that's something when we get into a bit more of the advanced aspects. But for now, this is good enough for you to get started with using the vectors. And do not worry much about this particular warning. It's just an indication that we kind of have this range-based for loop from the C++ level onwards. Okay, that's all. We will talk about the different versions of C++ in some of the later videos. So it's something we can discuss at that point in time. But for now, this is it about the vectors. So let's meet in the next video.